The city pulsed with life under the unrelenting summer sun, the glass-clad buildings reflecting a golden haze onto the bustling streets below. The scent of fresh bread mingled with exhaust fumes, and the distant chatter of vendors blended into the hum of an urban symphony. Victoria Bennett, wife of the esteemed Commissioner Jonathan Bennett, walked with practiced elegance, her heels tapping a steady rhythm against the pavement. She was a woman accustomed to grace under pressure, her composed demeanor a reflection of years spent in the shadow of her husband's high-profile career. She had just finished a productive meeting with the Women's Outreach Foundation, where she had personally overseen the approval of a new shelter for displaced families. There was a sense of quiet fulfillment in her steps as she made her way home, until the sharp wail of police sirens cut through the air, shattering the peaceful moment. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt in front of her grand townhouse, their red and blue lights flashing in ominous warning. Victoria's pulse quickened, a cold unease creeping up her spine as 4 officers stepped out. One, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a hardened face and an air of self-importance, took the lead. His badge gleamed under the sunlight, but his expression carried no warmth. His partner, younger and visibly nervous, adjusted his cap with a shaky hand. Victoria steadied herself, exuding the quiet authority that had always served her well. "Officers," she greeted, her voice even. "May I ask what this is about?" The lead officer barely spared her a glance before stating flatly, "We have reason to believe that illegal activity has been conducted in this residence. We need to conduct a search." Victoria's eyebrows arched. "Without a warrant?" The officer's jaw tightened. "This isn't up for debate, ma'am." Victoria inhaled deeply, keeping her composure. "Perhaps it would be best to wait for my husband, Commissioner Bennett. I'm sure—" "I don't care if you're President's wife," the officer interrupted, stepping forward with unmistakable authority. "Step aside." Before she could protest further, the officers moved past her, forcing their way into the house. The elegant stillness of her home was instantly shattered by the sound of heavy boots stomping through the rooms. Drawers were yanked open, furniture was overturned, and the rhythmic thud of fists against walls echoed as they searched for something, anything, to justify their presence. Victoria stood frozen, fury bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, her nails pressing into her palms. This wasn't just an intrusion, it was a violation. From outside, the murmur of a growing crowd reached her ears. Neighbors had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Phones were raised, capturing the scene, and among them stood Officer Ethan Carter. Young and idealistic, Carter had joined the force with the dream of upholding justice, of serving a system he believed in. But now, watching his fellow officers ransack the home of their own commissioner's wife, he felt a weight settle in his chest, a suffocating conflict between loyalty and integrity. He saw Victoria standing firm, her dignity unbroken despite the chaos. And he saw his colleagues, their badges reflecting the sunlight, as they overstepped the very laws they were sworn to uphold. This wasn't right. His heart pounded as he made his choice. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, breaking through the wall of onlookers. "Enough!" His voice rang through the space, causing heads to turn. The senior officer whipped around, his expression darkening. "Carter, stand down." But Ethan stood firm. "This isn't right," he said, his voice steady. "This search is unlawful." The air grew tense, the weight of the moment pressing against every onlooker. The senior officer's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You questioning orders, Carter?" "Yes." The word was simple, but it carried the weight of defiance. Silence stretched between them. Then, before another word could be spoken, the distant roar of a sleek, black car approaching cut through the air. The commissioner had arrived, and with him, the reckoning. The sleek black sedan rolled to a halt, its presence casting a long shadow over the gathered crowd. A moment later, the door swung open, and Commissioner Jonathan Bennett stepped out. The murmuring of the onlookers hushed, a ripple of anticipation spreading through them. Dressed in a sharply tailored suit, his silver-threaded hair combed with precision, the commissioner was the embodiment of power and discipline. His piercing blue eyes swept over the scene, his wife standing defiantly on the threshold, young Officer Carter caught between courage and fear, and the senior officer standing stiffly. suddenly aware of the magnitude of their misstep. The lead officer, Sergeant Pierce, visibly stiffened. He straightened his shoulders, though a bead of sweat betrayed his growing unease. Commissioner Bennett took slow, deliberate steps toward the house. Every officer in sight seemed to shrink under his gaze. "What," he said, his voice as cold as steel, "is the meaning of this?" No one spoke at first. The weight of his authority was suffocating, pressing down on the officers like an unseen force. Finally, Pierce cleared his throat, attempting to salvage some semblance of control. "Sir, we received a tip about suspicious activity in this residence. We followed protocol and initiated a search." Bennett's gaze remained unwavering. "Protocol?" His voice was dangerously low. "Did you have a warrant?" Pierce's silence spoke volumes. The commissioner exhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring with barely restrained fury. His eyes swept over his home, now in disarray. Personal belongings scattered, furniture overturned, the very walls of his sanctuary violated. "Your protocol is unlawful," he said, each word a calculated blow. "You enter my home without cause, without warrant, and without respect. You disregarded the law in the name of enforcing it." Pierce swallowed hard. "Sir, enough?" Bennett's voice cut through the air like a blade. The tension in the atmosphere was palpable. Every officer present knew they had crossed a line, one that could not be undone. Victoria, silent until now, stepped forward. Her gaze met her husband's, and in it, he saw everything she didn't need to say, her anger, her violation, her quiet strength. "I trust you'll handle this," she said simply, and with that, she turned on her heel and walked inside, leaving the wreckage for him to deal with. Commissioner Bennett turned his attention to the only man who had spoken out against the injustice, Officer Carter. The young officer stiffened, unsure of what was to come. "Sir, you spoke up." Bennett's voice held something unexpected. Acknowledgement. "Why?" Carter hesitated, but then squared his shoulders. "Because it was wrong, sir." A long pause. Then Bennett gave a single nod. "You're a good officer." Carter blinked, startled. He had expected anger, maybe even disciplinary action. "Not this." Bennett turned back to the others. "As for the rest of you," he said, his voice ice cold, "every officer involved in this unlawful raid will face disciplinary action, and you can rest assured this will not be brushed under the rug." Gasps rippled through the officers. Pierce's face turned ashen. "Sir, please, we were just... I don't want to hear excuses." Bennett's tone was final. "You will report to Internal Affairs immediately. Any officer unwilling to face the consequences is free to hand in their badge." Silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the officers nodded. The weight of justice had finally descended upon them. The media storm that followed was unlike anything the city had seen in years. Headlines blared across every newspaper. "Commissioner takes a stand against corruption." Footage of the unlawful raid, captured by bystanders, went viral, sparking outrage across the city. Citizens flooded social media, demanding accountability. Within days, multiple officers involved in a raid were suspended pending investigation. Some resigned in disgrace. Others attempted to justify their actions, but in the face of overwhelming evidence, their words fell on deaf ears. Victoria remained steadfast. She gave no interviews, made no public statements. Instead, she focused on rebuilding both her home and her sense of security. But Commissioner Bennett was far from finished. He stood before the department, addressing every officer under his command. "This institution exists to serve and protect," he declared, his voice carrying through the hall. "Not to intimidate, not to abuse, and certainly not to violate the very laws we are sworn to uphold." He let his gaze sweep over the room. "If any of you cannot abide by that principle, then you have no place here." The silence that followed was absolute. And just like that, the tides began to turn. In the months that followed, sweeping reforms were implemented. Oversight committees were strengthened. Officers underwent retraining. Policies were rewritten to ensure greater accountability. It was not a perfect solution. There would always be those who resisted change. But it was a start. As for Officer Carter, his courage did not go unnoticed. He was promoted, placed in a position where he could enact real change from within. He had taken a stand when it mattered most, and it had made all the difference. Victoria, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. She expanded her outreach efforts, working closely with community leaders to foster trust between the police and the citizens they served. She refused to let fear dictate her actions. And as for Commissioner Bennett, he understood that his fight was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. The city moved forward, forever changed by the events of that day. The reckless officers who had once acted with impunity were gone. In their place, a new standard had been set, one that held power accountable, one that demanded integrity. And in the quiet of their home, now restored to its former peace, Victoria and Jonathan Bennett sat together, knowing that their battle for justice had only just begun. But this time, they would not fight alone. They had ignited a movement, and there was no turning back.